when we define that word properly, because in extreme times like ours, we need extreme actions. And we need what King called creative extremists. And Martin Luther King articulated a vision in the 1960s of what he called the World House. The World House was a global cosmopolitan community that was united by shared values of peace and justice. The World House was a planet that was no longer divided by sexism, racism, and class divisions. It was a beautiful utopia that Martin Luther King articulated in the 1960s. But you know what? Until we extend that radical vision deeper and farther, that World House is still just a damn slaughterhouse. Because even within King's World House, animals are still being slaughtered. 48 billion farmed animals are killed every year around the world. 48 billion farmed animals. That's 8 times the human population being killed every year. That's more than 130 million animals a day, more than 5 million every hour, 100,000 animals a minute. And billions more die in the name of so-called science, so-called entertainment, so-called sport, and so-called fashion. Every second is a 9/11 attack for the animals. And I don't make any apologies for that analogy. This is a Holocaust for animals, and I refuse to apologize for drawing that comparison. Animal rights is the next logical step in human evolution. I've read books, for instance, argued by Francis Fukuyama, where he talked about we've reached the pinnacle of human evolution, the end of evolution, as the title of one of his books has it. That liberal capitalism is the summit of human creation. That we can go no farther than the pluralist capitalist democracy that we've created. Well, like all so-called progressive humanists, he forgot one thing, and that is that we're still destroying the planet. And so the next 2 stages in human evolution, that if we don't take, we will fail to survive, are that we need to now leap into the politics of nature. We need 1, a land ethic, and 2, animal rights. And once we take these next steps, maybe we can talk about the end of evolution. We've gone so far with expanding the human community away from the rights just of white male property owners, and over centuries of struggle to people of color and to women and to gays and lesbians, to the physically challenged. And we've expanded this community. Yes, it's imperfect. Yes, there are lots of struggles to come within the human community. But please don't seal these boundaries within a progressive humanist framework and suffer the illusion of believing that we are at the end of moral evolution, because we've just started. Oh, we've got the next step to take, which is the hardest step, and that is getting outside of our own narrow, selfish species interests and really re-articulating our relationships to the natural world. Animal rights represents the marker of moral progress that we can see in this world today, the universalization of rights. To the extent that rights become universalized to include the whole community, not just the human community, but the bio-community. That is how we can gauge that we're making moral progress. And so that is why I say animal rights is the next step in human moral evolution. And it challenges the last ugly prejudice that we have that really has yet to be challenged, and that is speciesism. The belief that one species is superior to another species, to all other species, because of their species reality or species nature alone. And that gives them the right to discriminate or use against or use other species as they see fit. So our society is undergoing right now a great learning process, just as we learn that differences in our color, our skin color, and the differences in our gender are irrelevant to moral reality and to the establishment of a moral community. So we're learning that differences in species also are all morally irrelevant. And I make a distinction between factual differences and what is morally relevant. Obviously, there are differences between human and non-human animals, but they're irrelevant. Just as all the differences amongst people here in this room are irrelevant to who has rights and who doesn't. The differences between human and non-human animals are irrelevant to the fact that they do have fundamental rights. So our similarities with the animals are much more important than our differences. And our similarities say that, number one, we are all sentient. And beyond that, number two, we are all subjects of a life. We have complex social and psychological characteristics. We are subjects of a life. And that's what unites us, and that's all that really matters. In the bio-community, in the expanding boundaries of rights, that we are all subjects of a life. Martin Luther King said, an injustice to one is an injustice to all, and that applies now to all species. Liberation is total. It's for all beings, or it's for none at all. Our fates are interconnected, and what we do to the animals, we do to ourselves. When we kill animals by the billions and eat them, we die of unnecessary diseases that we acquire through consuming animal fat. When we destroy their habitat, we destroy the environment for ourselves. When we're violent to animals, we bring that violence into our own culture, into our own communities, into our own families. We poison our own psyches and our own souls. The ALF and the ELF expand on, they do not negate, they expand on the noble American traditions of sabotage and civil disobedience and property destruction for a higher ethical cause and all kinds of resistance. They extend the right to freely exist to the entire bio community. One of the hottest political battles today, no doubt, is over the politics of nature. And we are quickly finding that we are in the middle of a new civil war in this country. A new civil war. On the one side, you have people who will do anything and everything to rape this planet for their own selfish interests and for their own profit. And on the other side, you find an increasingly militant community of activists who will resist this genocide, this omnicide, tooth and nail. And so we are beginning to divide as a nation over the politics of nature. And we are forming a guerrilla war against our oppressors. We can't fight them tank to tank, gun to gun. We have to go underground. They do not know how to fight and win a guerrilla war. The U.S. imperialist state got its ass kicked in Vietnam. It's getting its ass kicked right now in Iraq. And it's going to get its ass kicked again by the underground resistance movements for animal and earth liberation. We need to multiply this resistance so that in every town, in every community, there is an ALF and an ELF smashing the engines of destruction. In 1973, the ALF emerged in England. They emerged, as you likely know, out of the Hunt Saboteurs movement. And when the Hunt Sabs were getting their asses kicked by the hunters and the state was doing nothing about it, when they realized that their tactics were not as effective as they hoped, they decided they'd go underground. They decided they were going to have to do something more radical to stop these hunts. So they started destroying the equipment of the hunters, and they sabotaged boats of sealers. And they started to engage in property destruction, and they started to engage in arson. And they escalated their attacks to the vivisection industries. Ronnie Lee and a few others who named themselves first the Band of Mercy and then renamed themselves the Animal Liberation Front. And they had a twofold purpose. One was liberating animals, the other one was sabotage of the property of oppressors, of those who were exploiting animals. This is a nonviolent philosophy, and some of you may have a hard time with this paradox. If it is even that, it's not a contradiction. They're a nonviolent group. As you know, it's no accident that in over 30 years of militant actions, including hundreds, thousands of arson attacks, the ALF has never hurt or harmed a single human being. They ought not to be criticized for their radicalism. They ought to be commended for their restraint.